Most people think sleep is when the brain switches off. You close your eyes, you stop working, you stop thinking, you rest. And in one sense, that is true. But the more researchers study sleep, the clearer it becomes that sleep is not simply the brain shutting down, sleep is the brain doing maintenance. While we sleep, the brain appears to process memories, organize information, reset emotional systems, support attention, and clear waste products that build up during waking hours. That means sleep is not just important for how tired we feel the next day. It may influence how well we remember, how clearly we think, how calmly we respond, how well we learn, and possibly even how well the brain protects itself as we age. In this video, I want to explore 5 simple questions. Does sleep improve memory? How does poor sleep affect the quality of our thoughts? Does sleep affect mood and emotional control? What happens in the brain while we sleep? And can poor sleep increase the long-term risk of cognitive decline? I'm Leon Figures, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoy the content, find it useful, or think it may help somebody else, consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who may benefit from it. Most of us have experienced the mental fog that comes after a bad night's sleep. You wake up tired, you feel slower, you forget simple things, you lose focus, you become more irritable. You make poorer decisions, and sometimes even basic tasks feel harder than they should. But this is not just weakness, it's not just laziness, and it is not just a lack of discipline. A growing body of research suggests that poor sleep affects the brain in measurable ways. So let's start with memory. Does sleep improve memory? One of the strongest areas of sleep research is the relationship between sleep and the memory consolidation. Memory consolidation is the process where the brain takes information we have learnt and helps stabilize it, organize it, and store it more effectively. Sleep helps the brain decide what to keep. During the day, we are constantly taking in information. Names, faces, instructions, conversations, skills, experiences, problems, mistakes, lessons, but taking the information in is only part of learning. The brain still has to process it, and sleep appears to play an important part in that process. Researchers such as Matthew Walker and Robert Strickgold have reviewed evidence showing that sleep supports memory encoding, consolidation, brain plasticity, and reconsolidation. That sounds technical, but the basic idea is simple. You can learn something while awake, but sleep helps the brain strengthen and organize that learning afterwards. That is why sleep matters for students. It matters for athletes. It matters for musicians. It matters for people learning new jobs. It matters for anyone trying to improve a skill. Practice matters. Repetition matters. Effort matters. But sleep helps the brain lock in some of the benefits of that effort. This is one reason pulling an all-nighter can be so counterproductive. People often think staying awake longer gives them more time to learn. But if that extra time destroys sleep, it may also damage the brain's ability to consolidate what was learned. You might read the material. You might stare at the screen. You might push through fatigue. But the next day, the information may not be as stable, as clear, or as easy to retrieve. Sleep is not just recovery from learning. Sleep is part of learning, and this applies beyond academic study. If you are practicing a movement, learning a recipe, training a new technique, editing videos, driving a new route, or trying to build a new habit, your brain still has to organize that information. Sleep gives the brain a chance to do that. That is the first major point. Sleep helps memory. Not because sleep is magical, but because the brain continues processing information after the learning session is over. Now let's move to the second question. How does poor sleep affect the quality of our thinking? This is where many people underestimate the damage because poor sleep does not always make you completely dysfunctional. You may still get up, go to work, have conversations, cook, drive, exercise, look after children, run errands, and because you are technically functioning, you may assume your brain is fine. But research suggests the brain can become less reliable after sleep deprivation. A useful review by Aloha and Polo Cantola examined the impact of sleep deprivation on cognitive performance. They found that sleep deprivation most clearly affects attention and working memory, while also affecting long-term memory and decision making. Attention is your ability to focus on what matters. Working memory is your brain's ability to hold information in mind and use it. For example, remembering what somebody just said while you are replying, keeping track of numbers in your head, following multi-step instructions, solving a problem without losing a thread, staying focused while reading, or making decisions while several things are happening at once. When sleep is restricted, these systems can suffer. You may not notice it immediately, but your brain becomes prone to lapses. You lose focus more easily. You forget what you were doing. You become slower to respond. You make small mistakes. You find it harder to concentrate, and your judgment may become worse. This is one of the reasons poor sleep can be dangerous, because people often feel they are coping, but their reaction time, attention, and decision making may be impaired. Think about driving. You may feel awake enough to drive, but your attention may be drifting. Your reaction time may be slower. Your ability to notice danger may be reduced. That matters. This reminds me of one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I literally thought my life may come to an end. I had a morning meeting in Stoke. I left mine at 5 a.m. and drove up there. Arrived at 8. Had breakfast, coffee, had my morning meetings, had lunch, and started my drive home about 1 p.m. As soon as I hit the motorway, my body decided to shut down. It was as if it saw the motorway, realised I had a 3 to 4 hour drive ahead, and said, absolutely not. You need to sleep, and you need to sleep now. The nearest service station exit was about 20 to 30 minutes away. I was slapping my face to wake myself up, fighting for my life to keep my eyes open. I kept a much longer distance from the car ahead of me as my eyelids kept closing without my control. I prayed for my life. I knew it was in God's hands if I survived this. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. It still brings chills remembering it now. I made it to the service station, parked up, and slept. After about 45 minutes to an hour, I was alert and functioning again. I thought I would need at least 4 hours. I drove home, and after that, I decided I needed to plan sleep around long drives as if my life depended on it. Now, thinking about work, if you work in a kitchen, a hospital, a school, a warehouse, a vehicle, a gym, or any environment where accuracy and judgment matter, poor sleep can affect performance, not always dramatically, but enough to make errors more likely. This is important because sleep deprivation does not only reduce energy, it reduces mental sharpness, and that has consequences. If you are trying to make better decisions around food, poor sleep can make that harder. If you are trying to train properly, poor sleep can reduce focus and coordination. If you are trying to build a business, study, manage people, or produce creative work, poor sleep can make your thinking slower and less organized. The brain still works, but it works with less precision. That is why poor sleep can feel like mental fog. The brain is operating, but not at its best. Now let's move to mood and emotional control. Does sleep affect how we feel? The evidence suggests yes, and this may be one of the most relatable effects of poor sleep. After a bad night's sleep, people are often more irritable, less patient, more reactive, more negative, more sensitive, more likely to overreact, and less able to regulate emotions. This is not just a personality issue. It's not simply that someone has a bad attitude. Poor sleep appears to affect the emotional systems of the brain. One important study was conducted by Yu, Gujar, Hu, Jules, and Walker. The study examined what happens in the emotional brain after sleep deprivation. The researchers used brain imaging and found that sleep loss increased emotional reactivity, especially in response to negative images. They also found evidence of reduced communication between areas involved in emotional regulation and the amygdala. The amygdala is a brain region heavily involved in detecting threats and generating emotional responses. The prefrontal cortex helps regulate behavior, judgment, and impulse control. When people are sleep deprived, the emotional part of the brain can become more reactive, while the control system that regulates that reaction may become less effective. That matters because many people have experienced this in real life. After poor sleep, a small comment feels bigger. A minor inconvenience feels more irritating. A delay feels more stressful. A disagreement feels more personal. You may know logically that something is not a big deal, but emotionally, it feels harder to manage. That is the brain under strain. This is not an excuse for poor behavior. Being tired does not give anyone a free pass to be rude, careless, or reckless, but it does explain why emotional control is harder when sleep is poor. Sleep gives the emotional brain a chance to reset. Without enough sleep, the brain may become more reactive, and when emotionally reactivity increases, relationships can suffer, work can suffer, decision making can suffer, dieting can suffer, training can suffer. Because if you are tired, irritable, and reactive, you are less likely to make calm and measured decisions. You are more likely to comfort eat, skip training, snap at people, procrastinate, avoid difficult tasks, or choose the easiest option rather than the best option. This is why sleep is not just a health issue, it is a behavior issue. It affects the mental state you bring into the day. Now let's talk about what happens in the brain while we sleep. This is one of the most fascinating parts of sleep research. For a long time, many people thought of sleep mostly as rest. The body rests, the brain rests, the mind switches off. But research suggests that the sleeping brain is highly active. Different stages of sleep appear to support different functions. Some stages are involved in physical restoration. Some are linked with memory. Some are linked with emotional processing. Some may be involved in clearing waste products from the brain. One of the most influential studies in this area was published in Science in 2013 by Z and colleagues. The study was called Sleep Drives Metabolite Clearance from the Adult Brain. This research was carried out in mice, so we need to be careful not to overstate it as direct proof in humans, but the findings were extremely important. The researchers found that during sleep, the space between the brain cells increased, allowing fluid to move more effectively through the brain. This appeared to help clear waste products, including beta amyloid. Beta amyloid is a protein associated with Alzheimer's disease. This system is often referred to as the glymphatic system. A simple way to explain this is this. During the day, the brain is busy thinking, reacting, processing, planning, moving, learning, deciding. While all this is happening, metabolic waste builds up. During sleep, the brain appears to increase processes that help clear some of that waste. This is where the phrase sleep cleans the brain comes from. But we have to say it carefully. It does not mean one good night of sleep scrubs the brain clean. It does not mean sleep prevents every brain disease. It does not mean we carefully understand every detail in humans. But the research suggests that sleep may be an important time for the brain maintenance. And that is a powerful idea. because it changes how we think about sleep. Sleep is not just the absence of wakefulness, it is an active biological state. The brain is doing work, memory work, emotional work, cognitive work, maintenance work. If wakefulness is when the brain gathers information, sleep is when the brain processes, files, resets, and repairs. That is why constantly cutting sleep short may have consequences. You are not just losing rest, you may be reducing the time your brain has to perform essential maintenance. Now let's move to the fifth question. Can poor sleep increase the long-term risk of cognitive decline? This is where we need to be careful. We should not exaggerate. One bad night's sleep does not mean you are going to develop dementia. A stressful week does not mean your brain is ruined. And sleep is only one factor among many. Age matters, genetics matters, cardiovascular health matters, blood pressure matters, blood sugar matters, exercise matters, diet matters, smoking matters, alcohol matters, education matters. But the evidence increasingly suggests that chronic poor sleep may be linked with worse brain health over time. One major study in this area was the Whitehall 2 cohort study by Sabia and colleagues, published in Nature Communications in 2021. The study followed people over many years and examined sleep duration in midlife and later dementia risk. The researchers found that people sleeping 6 hours or less at ages 50 and 60 had a higher risk of dementia later in life compared with those sleeping around 7 hours. They also found that persistent short sleep duration across midlife was associated with around 30% increased risk of dementia. That does not prove that short sleep directly causes dementia. Observational studies can show associations, but they cannot prove every part of the causal chain. There may be other factors involved. Poor health can affect sleep. Stress can affect sleep. Early brain changes can affect sleep. Lifestyle can affect both sleep and dementia risk, so we have to be careful. But the association is concerning enough to take seriously. Another useful study was published in JAMA Neurology in 2023 by Himali and colleagues. This study looked at slow wave sleep, which is often called deep sleep. The researchers found that greater reductions in slow wave sleep were associated with increased risk of developing dementia. Again, this does not mean deep sleep loss is the only cause, but it suggests that deep sleep may be important for long-term brain health. And when we combine that with other research showing that sleep deprivation can increase Alzheimer's related proteins like beta amyloid in the brain, the picture becomes more important. One experimental study by Shakuri Kajori and colleagues found that one night of sleep deprivation increased beta amyloid burden in the brain regions implicated in Alzheimer's disease. That does not mean that one bad night causes Alzheimer's. It does not mean you should panic after a poor sleep, but it does suggest that sleep deprivation can influence biological pathways connected with brain aging, neurodegeneration. Taken together, the evidence points in one direction. Sleep appears to matter for long-term brain health, not as a guarantee, not as a miracle cure, not as the only factor, but as one important part of protecting the brain. Now let's put all of this together. Sleep improves memory because the brain uses sleep to consolidate and organize information. Poor sleep makes thinking worse because attention, working memory, and reaction time and decision making become less reliable. Sleep affects mood because the emotional brain can become more reactive. When sleep is restricted, while the systems that regulate emotion become less effective. During sleep, the brain is not inactive. It is processing memories, regulating emotional systems, and carrying out maintenance processes, including waste clearance, and over the long term, chronic poor sleep appears to be associated with increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia. That is a powerful set of findings because many people treat sleep as optional, something to cut when life gets busy. something to sacrifice for work for, something to make up for later, something less important than diet or exercise, but the brain does not appear to see it that way. If you care about memory, sleep matters. If you care about focus, sleep matters. If you care about mood, sleep matters. If you care about decision making, sleep matters. If you care about long-term brain health, sleep matters. Now again, sleep is not magic. You cannot sleep your way into intelligence. You cannot sleep your way out of every health problem. You cannot ignore diet, exercise, stress, relationships, blood pressure, blood sugar, and lifestyle. But sleep is one of the foundations, and when that foundation is weak, everything else becomes harder. The quality of your thinking deteriorates, your ability to regulate emotions worsens, your memory suffers, make worse decisions, you recover poorly, you perform worse, and over time your brain may pay the price. So what can we actually do with this information? The first step is to stop treating sleep as wasted time. Sleep is not lost productivity. Sleep supports productivity. Sleep is not laziness. Sleep supports performance. Sleep is not the enemy of discipline. Sleep helps discipline become easier. The second step is consistency. For many people, the goal does not need to be perfection. It may simply be going to bed slightly earlier, waking up at a more consistent time, reducing screens before bed, getting morning sunlight, keeping the bedroom darker and cooler, reducing late night caffeine, and treating sleep like part of the health plan, not something separate from it. Because the brain you use tomorrow is being prepared tonight. Your memory tomorrow is being shaped tonight. Your emotional control tomorrow is being influenced tonight. Your focus tomorrow is being built tonight. And possibly your long-term brain health is being protected by the habits you repeat night after night. So does sleep improve memory? The evidence suggests yes. Why does the quality of our thoughts worsen after poor sleep? Because sleep loss impairs attention, working memory, reaction time, and decision making. Does sleep affect mood and emotional control? Yes. Poor sleep appears to make the emotional brain more reactive and less regulated. What happens in the brain while we sleep? The brain processes memories, resets systems, regulates emotion, and appears to carry out important maintenance and waste clearance functions. Can poor sleep increase long-term risk of cognitive decline? The evidence suggests chronic poor sleep is associated with a higher risk, although it is not the only factor and the relationship is complex. The simple message is this: sleep is the brain maintenance. It is not the brain switching off. It is the brain doing the work. You get one body, fuel it properly.